The dense streets of Tormax 3 were alive with activity, a mix of traders, beggars, and opportunists filling the air with shouts and chatter. But amidst the bustling chaos, Dr. Corbin Hale walked with purpose, his medical kit slung over his shoulder. Known for his refusal to turn anyone away, Corbin had earned a reputation as the only medic willing to venture into the darkest corners of the city. Tonight, his destination was the Grackland slums, a dilapidated sector where desperation and violence were as common as the neon lights flickering above. He had received word of an injured alien, a woman left to die in one of the alleys. When Corbin arrived, a small crowd had gathered. Their faces were a mixture of curiosity and fear, their voices low as they whispered about the injured being. "She's too big," one muttered. "A monster," said another. "Stay away or she'll crush you." Corbin pushed his way through, his eyes narrowing as he caught sight of the figure they spoke of. Slumped against the wall, her massive frame barely fitting in the alley, was a giant alien woman. Her skin was a deep iridescent blue, and her arms were as thick as tree trunks. But it was her face, soft, pained, and helpless, that struck Corbin the most. Without hesitation, he knelt beside her. "Can you hear me?" he asked, his voice steady. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing golden irises that flickered with confusion and fear. "Oh," she rasped. "I'm a doctor," Corbin replied, pulling out his scanner. "I'm here to help." The crowd murmured louder, some urging him to leave, others simply gawking. Ignoring them, Corbin focused on the alien. She was bleeding from a deep gash along her side, and her breathing was shallow. Her body showed signs of malnutrition and brutal treatment, scars and bruises covering her massive limbs. "You've been through hell," Corbin muttered, shaking his head, "but you're not dying tonight." The crowd's unease turned to alarm when a shadow loomed over the alley. Grask, a local gang leader and slaver, appeared, flanked by armed thugs. His sneer widened as he spotted the giant woman. "So this is where you ran to, beast," Grask growled, his sharp teeth glinting. "She's my property, doctor. Step away unless you want to lose those hands of yours." Corbin straightened, his heart pounding but his resolve unwavering. "She's injured and needs medical attention. You're not taking her anywhere." Grask chuckled darkly. "You've got guts, human, but no one crosses me and lives to tell about it." Corbin didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of you." The standoff grew tense, but Corbin used the moment to press a discreet button on his wristband, activating an emergency signal. He didn't have long. "You want her? You'll have to go through me," Corbin said, stepping in front of the woman. Grask's thugs moved to attack, but the sound of approaching sirens made them pause. The gang leader cursed under his breath. "This isn't over, doctor. She's mine." As Grask and his men retreated, Corbin turned back to the alien woman. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded weakly, her voice strained. I think so." "Good. Let's get you out of here," Corbin said, offering his arm for support. Despite her immense size, she leaned on him, her steps heavy but determined. Together they disappeared into the shadows, heading toward the safety of Corbin's clinic. The journey to Corbin's clinic was slow and grueling. The alien woman's injuries made every step agonizing, and her towering frame barely fit through the narrow alleys of the slums. Corbin stayed close, offering words of encouragement as they navigated the maze-like streets. When they finally reached the clinic, a modest structure tucked away in a quieter part of the city, Corbin helped her inside. She collapsed onto a reinforced examination table, her massive form dwarfing the room. "Let's start with introductions," Corbin said, grabbing his tools. "I'm Dr. Corbin Hale, and you are?" The woman hesitated, her golden eyes flickering with caution. "Lenara," she finally said, her voice low and melodic despite her exhaustion. "Lenara," Corbin repeated, nodding. "Nice to meet you. Now let's take care of those wounds." As Corbin cleaned the gash on her side, Lenara flinched, her body tensing. Why are you helping me?" she asked, her tone filled with disbelief. Corbin paused, meeting her gaze. "Because you need help. It's as simple as that." "Others ran from me," Lenara said softly. "They called me a monster." "You're not a monster," Corbin replied firmly. "You're hurt and you've been through more than anyone should. That doesn't make you any less deserving of care." Over the next few hours, Corbin worked tirelessly to treat Lenara's injuries. He stitched her wounds, applied antiseptics, and set a broken arm. Lenara remained quiet, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "You're not like the others," she said after a while. Corbin smiled faintly. "I get that a lot, but honestly, I just believe everyone deserves a chance." Lenara's gaze softened. "You're kind. That's rare in this galaxy." "It shouldn't be," Corbin replied. "Kindness should be the norm, not the exception." For the first time, a small smile appeared on Lenara's lips. It was a fragile thing, but it carried a weight of hope that Corbin couldn't ignore. As the night deepened, Corbin checked Lenara's vitals one last time before stepping out to secure the clinic. Outside, Kara, a local informant and occasional ally, waited for him. "You've got a problem, Corbin," she said, her voice low. "Grask isn't letting this go. He's rallied his men and plans to take her back." Corbin's jaw tightened. "Let him try. I'm not handing her over." Kara sighed. "You're playing a dangerous game, Doc. You can't fight them all." "Then I'll find another way," Corbin said, determination etched into his features. "I won't let her go back to that hell." Inside the clinic, Lenara overheard their conversation. Clenching her fists, she resolved not to be a burden. "I'll fight too," she whispered to herself. "I won't let them hurt him." As the city settled into uneasy quiet, the clinic became a fortress of fragile hope, where two unlikely allies prepared to face the storm that was surely coming. The morning air around the clinic was tense. Dr. Corbin Hale stood at the front door, surveying the quiet street with wary eyes. The early rays of light illuminated the patchwork defenses he had hastily assembled overnight: reinforced doors, makeshift barriers, and a few rudimentary traps. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Inside, Lenara sat on the reinforced examination table, her large frame making the room feel smaller than it was. Her wounds were healing, but the fatigue of years of abuse was etched into her posture. Her golden eyes followed Corbin as he entered. "They're coming for me, aren't they?" she asked, her deep voice steady but tinged with resignation. Corbin nodded. "Grask won't let this go. He sees you as an asset, and he's not the type to lose gracefully." Lenara looked down at her hands, scarred and massive, her expression unreadable. "I can leave. Spare you the trouble." "That's not happening," Corbin said firmly, crossing the room to stand in front of her. "You're my patient, and now you're my responsibility. We're in this together." For a moment, Lenara seemed at a loss for words. Finally, she said, "I've never had anyone fight for me before." Corbin smiled faintly. "Well, there's a first time for everything." Kara, the informant who had warned Corbin of Grask's intentions, arrived later that morning. She carried a bundle of weapons and a grim expression. "Grask's gathering his men. They'll hit you by nightfall." Corbin accepted a blaster rifle from her, checking its charge. "How many?" "At least 20, Kara replied. "And they're armed to the teeth. This won't be easy, Corbin." "It never is," he muttered, handing another weapon to Lenara. She accepted it hesitantly, her fingers dwarfing the handle. "I don't want to hurt anyone," Lenara said, her voice low. "You may not have a choice," Corbin replied, "but we'll do everything we can to avoid bloodshed. The goal is to make them leave, not start a war." Despite her reservations, Lenara trained with Corbin and Kara throughout the day. Her immense size and strength made her a formidable opponent, but years of mistreatment had left her confidence fragile. Corbin worked patiently, guiding her through defensive stances and basic tactics. "You're stronger than you think," he told her after a particularly successful maneuver. "And you've got something they don't, heart." Lenara's golden eyes softened. "You believe in me more than I believe in myself." "Then start believing," Corbin said with a small smile. "Because tonight, we're going to show them exactly who they're dealing with." As night fell, the street outside the clinic grew eerily quiet. The faint hum of Grask's vehicles broke the silence, their headlights casting long, menacing shadows against the buildings. Corbin, Kara, and Lenara took their positions inside, the tension thick in the air. The first wave came quickly. Grask's men approached the clinic's barricades, their weapons raised. Corbin waited until they were within range before activating the first trap, a set of crude explosives that sent debris flying and scattered the attackers. "Fall back," one of the mercenaries shouted as the remaining men retreated to regroup. Inside, Lenara watched with wide eyes. "That worked?" "It's a start," Corbin replied, reloading his blaster. "But they'll come back stronger." Grask himself led the next assault, his booming voice echoing down the street. "You're making a mistake, Morrow. Hand over the giant, and I might let you live." Corbin responded with a shot that ricocheted off a nearby wall. "Come and get her, Grask." The slaver growled in frustration, signaling his men to advance. They moved with precision, their weapons trained on the clinic's defenses. Corbin and Kara fired back, their shots deliberate and controlled, but the mercenaries' numbers began to overwhelm them. "Get to cover," Corbin shouted as a grenade detonated near the front door, blasting apart the barricades. Lenara, who had been holding back, stepped forward. Her massive frame filled the gap left by the broken barricade, and her voice rang out like thunder. "Enough." The attackers hesitated, their fear palpable. Lenara raised her weapon but didn't fire. Instead, she slammed her free hand into the ground, the force sending a shockwave that knocked several men off their feet. Inspired by Lenara's show of strength, the defenders rallied. Kara led a flanking maneuver, taking out the remaining attackers from behind, while Corbin provided cover fire. Lenara used her size to shield the others, her presence alone enough to drive back Grask's men. As the mercenaries retreated, Grask stood alone, his face twisted with rage. "You think this is over?" he snarled. "I'll be back with twice the men." Corbin stepped forward, his blaster trained on the slaver. "No, you won't, because if you come back, we won't just stop you. We'll destroy everything you've built." Grask hesitated, his bravado faltering under Corbin's glare. Finally, he turned and fled into the night. As the dust settled, Corbin surveyed the wreckage. The clinic was damaged, but it still stood. Lenara, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion, looked at him with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "We did it," she said softly. Corbin nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "We did. But this isn't over. Grask might not come back, but there are others like him out there." "Then we'll fight them too," Lenara said, her voice steady. "I'm done running." Corbin placed a hand on her arm, his expression filled with quiet admiration. "And I'll be right here, fighting with you." Together, they began clearing the debris, their bond forged in the fire of battle. The clinic might have been scarred, but it had become a symbol of hope, a place where even the most feared and forgotten could find sanctuary. The aftermath of the battle left the clinic scarred but standing. Inside, Dr. Corbin Hale and Lenara worked alongside the community, clearing rubble and repairing the damage. The air was filled with the hum of activity, the lingering tension from the night before softened by the camaraderie of survival. Kara approached Corbin, a tired but satisfied look on her face. "We made it through, but Grask won't stay gone for long. He doesn't take humiliation lightly." Corbin nodded, his eyes scanning the bustling clinic. "We need to be ready. This place is more than a clinic now. It's a symbol. Grask won't just want revenge, he'll want to destroy what we've built here." Lenara, overhearing the conversation, stepped forward. "Then let's make sure he can't. I won't let him take this away from you, or from me." Her voice carried a quiet strength, and Corbin couldn't help but admire her resilience. "We'll fight, Lenara," he said. "But first, we rebuild." As word of their victory spread, more people arrived at the clinic, some seeking refuge, others offering help. Former slaves, outcasts, and locals who had once been too afraid to act now came together, inspired by Lenara's courage and Corbin's leadership. Kara organized the volunteers, assigning tasks and gathering resources. Lenara, despite her injuries, took on the heavy lifting, her immense strength proving invaluable. She worked tirelessly, her determination fueling those around her. During a break, a young alien child approached Lenara, holding a small flower. "You're a hero," the child said, their voice shy but sincere. Lenara knelt, her massive frame dwarfing the child. "I'm no hero," she said softly. "I'm just doing what's right." The child smiled, placing the flower in Lenara's hand. "That's what heroes do." Later that evening, as the day's work wound down, Corbin found Lenara sitting outside the clinic, the small flower still in her hand. The sky above Tormax III was a tapestry of stars, the air quiet save for the faint hum of activity in the distance. "You've come a long way in just a few days," Corbin said, sitting beside her. Lenara turned the flower over in her fingers, her expression contemplative. "I never thought I'd have this, a place to belong, people who see me as more than a monster." "You were never a monster," Corbin said firmly. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met, and not just physically. You've shown people what's possible when you stand up for yourself, and for others." Lenara looked at him, her golden eyes soft. "And you've shown me what kindness looks like, I didn't think humans could be like you. Corbin smiled, a warmth spreading through him. Well, I'm glad I proved you wrong. The peace was shattered 3 days later when Kara rushed into the clinic, her expression grim. Grask's back, she said, her voice low but urgent, and he's brought reinforcements. Corbin's jaw tightened. How many? At least 30, heavily armed, Kara replied. They're setting up outside the district. Looks like they're planning a siege. Lenara stepped forward, her presence commanding. We fight. Corbin looked at her, concern etched into his face. You're still recovering, Lenara. This isn't just a skirmish, it's a war. Then let's end it, Lenara said, her voice steady. I'm not letting him hurt anyone else, not again. The clinic became a hive of activity as the defenders prepared. Volunteers armed themselves with whatever they could find. Blasters, makeshift shields, and improvised explosives. Lenara took charge of fortifying the clinic's walls, her strength turning rubble into barriers. Corbin worked tirelessly, organizing supplies and treating those who had been injured in the previous fight. He also took time to craft a plan with Kara and Lenara, relying on their combined experience to devise a strategy. We lure them into the narrow streets, Kara suggested. Their numbers won't matter if they can't maneuver. And I'll hold the line, Lenara said, her golden eyes fierce. Let them come, I won't back down. Corbin nodded, his resolve hardening. This ends here. As night fell, Grask's forces advanced on the clinic. Their vehicles rumbled through the narrow streets, their floodlights piercing the darkness. Grask himself led the charge, his voice booming over a loudspeaker. Give me the giant, and I'll spare the rest of you. He shouted, Defy me, and I'll burn this place to the ground. Inside the clinic, Lenara stood at the barricades, her massive form a reassuring presence. Corbin joined her, his blaster ready. We're not giving you up, he said, and I'm not running, Lenara replied. The first wave of mercenaries attacked, their weapons lighting up the night. The defenders held their ground, using the narrow streets to funnel the attackers into traps. Explosions rocked the area as improvised devices detonated, scattering Grask's forces. When the second wave breached the outer defenses, Lenara stepped into the fray. Her sheer size and strength turned the tide, her presence a rallying point for the defenders. She disarmed attackers with ease, her movements swift and deliberate despite her injuries. Corbin fought beside her, his precise shots taking out key targets. Keep moving, he shouted, coordinating the defenders as they pushed back the mercenaries. Grask, watching from a distance, snarled in frustration. Fall back, he barked to his men. Regroup. As the mercenaries retreated, Lenara and Corbin stood together, their breaths heavy but their spirits unbroken. The battle ended with Grask's forces in retreat, but the cost was high. The clinic was heavily damaged and many of the defenders bore injuries. Yet amidst the wreckage, there was hope. Lenara, her massive frame slumped with exhaustion, looked at Corbin. We did it, she said softly. We did, Corbin replied, his voice filled with quiet pride. But it's not over. Grask will come back unless we stop him for good. Then we'll be ready, Lenara said, her golden eyes glinting with determination. Together. As dawn broke over Tormax 3, the clinic stood as a testament to their resilience, a beacon of hope in a galaxy that desperately needed it. The aftermath of the battle left the clinic in a fragile state. The defenders, battered but alive, gathered in the rubble-strewn courtyard to assess their losses. Dr. Corbin Hale moved from person to person, treating wounds and offering words of encouragement. Despite the exhaustion etched into his features, his resolve remained firm. Lenara, her massive frame towering over the others, worked tirelessly alongside him. Her strength, both physical and emotional, had become a cornerstone of the community. Children who had once stared at her with fear now approached her with awe, their wide eyes full of admiration. Dr. Hale, Kara said, stepping up to Corbin, her voice low. Grask's forces are licking their wounds, but they won't stay quiet for long. Word is he's gathering reinforcements from the outer systems. Corbin glanced toward Lenara, who was lifting debris to clear a safe path through the clinic. We don't have much time, he murmured. If he brings an army, we won't stand a chance. The survivors convened in the clinic's makeshift war room, a dimly lit storage space now filled with maps and supply lists. Corbin stood at the center, his hands braced on the table. Lenara sat beside him, her golden eyes scanning the plans with quiet intensity. We can't wait for Grask to hit us again, Corbin began. This time, we take the fight to him. The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Kara broke the silence. You're talking about going after his base? It's suicide, Corbin. No, Lenara interjected, her deep voice calm but firm. It's survival. If we don't stop him now, he'll destroy everything we've built. Corbin nodded. We've got one chance to end this. Grask's base is heavily fortified, but it also houses his supply caches. If we can destroy those, we'll cripple his ability to fight. Kara sighed, running a hand through her hair. It's risky, but it might just work. Over the next few days, the community prepared for the assault. Kara led a team to scout Grask's base, gathering critical intel on its defenses. Lenara trained the defenders, her massive strength and combat instincts inspiring confidence in even the most reluctant fighters. Corbin, meanwhile, worked on the logistics, stockpiling medical supplies, creating escape plans, and reinforcing their weapons. He also spent time with Lenara, ensuring she was fully healed for the mission. You don't have to do this, Corbin said one evening as they worked side by side. You've already given so much. Lenara paused, looking at him with a steady gaze. This fight isn't just yours, Corbin. It's mine too. For the first time in my life, I'm not running. I'm standing for something that matters. Corbin nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. Then we stand together. Under the cover of darkness, the defenders launched their assault. Grask's base loomed on the horizon, a sprawling fortress surrounded by towering walls and automated turrets. Corbin, Lenara, and Kara led the strike team, their movements swift and precise. The attack began with a diversion. Kara's team set off explosions near the main gate, drawing Grask's forces away from the southern perimeter. Corbin and Lenara used the distraction to infiltrate the base through an unguarded maintenance tunnel. Inside, the tension was palpable. Lenara's size made stealth difficult, but her presence was invaluable when they encountered resistance. With a single sweep of her arm, she disarmed a group of guards, her strength leaving them stunned. Corbin pressed forward, his focus on the supply caches. We need to plant the charges and get out before reinforcements arrive, he said, his voice low but urgent. Lenara nodded, her golden eyes scanning the dimly lit corridors. I'll cover you. As they reached the supply room, Grask himself appeared, flanked by his elite guards. His face twisted into a sneer as he spotted Lenara and Corbin. I warned you, Moro, Grask growled. You should have stayed in your little clinic. Corbin stepped forward, his blaster raised, and you should have learned to pick your battles. Grask laughed, drawing an energy blade. Let's see if your convictions are as strong as your defiance. The room erupted into chaos. Lenara charged at the guards, her sheer size and strength overwhelming them. Corbin focused on Grask, their clash a brutal dance of fire and steel. Despite his smaller stature, Corbin's agility and precision kept him in the fight. As the battle raged, Lenara fought with a ferocity that stunned even Grask's hardened guards. Her movements were calculated and powerful, each strike a declaration of her newfound freedom. Corbin managed to disarm Grask, pinning him against a wall. It's over, he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Grask sneered. You think killing me will end this? Another will rise to take my place. Corbin didn't flinch. Maybe, but it won't be you. Before Grask could respond, Lenara stepped forward, her golden eyes locked onto the slaver, her voice filled with quiet resolve. You don't control me anymore. Together, Corbin and Lenara planted the charges, setting a timer before retreating. As they exited the base, the explosions lit up the night, a series of fiery blooms that marked the end of Grask's reign. The survivors regrouped at a safe distance, their cheers echoing in the darkness. Kara approached Corbin and Lenara, her face lit with relief. We did it, she said, her voice almost disbelieving. Corbin glanced at Lenara, a faint smile tugging at his lips. No, he said, we all did. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, the defenders returned to the clinic. The battle had been won, but the journey was far from over. Together they began the work of rebuilding, their bond stronger than ever. Lenara, standing beside Corbin, looked out at the bustling courtyard. For the first time I feel free, she said softly. You are, Corbin replied, his voice filled with quiet pride. And you're not alone. As the day began, the clinic stood as a beacon of hope, a place where even the most unlikely allies could find strength, purpose, and a home. The destruction of Grask's base sent ripples across Tormax 3 and beyond. His network of slavers crumbled, his mercenaries scattered, and his name became synonymous with failure. Yet, in the wake of their victory, Dr. Corbin Hale, Lenara, and the community of survivors faced the daunting task of rebuilding not just their clinic, but their lives. The clinic's courtyard buzzed with activity as people worked to repair the damage. Lenara, despite her massive size, moved delicately among the workers, lifting heavy beams and setting them into place. Her golden eyes, once shadowed by fear and uncertainty, now carried a sense of purpose. "You've become something of a legend," Kara said, walking beside Corbin as he distributed supplies. "Words spread across the district. They're calling you the giant healer." Corbin chuckled, shaking his head. "I didn't do this alone. Lenara deserves that title more than I do." "Maybe," Kara replied with a smirk, "but you've both given people something they've never had before, hope." As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, Corbin found Lenara sitting alone near the edge of the courtyard. She held a small flower in her massive hand, its delicate petals contrasting with her strength. "You've been busy," Corbin said, taking a seat beside her. Lenara smiled faintly. "It feels good to build something instead of breaking it." "You've built more than you realize," Corbin replied. "This place, this community, it wouldn't exist without you." Lenara turned to him, her golden eyes filled with gratitude. "I never thought I'd find a place like this, or someone like you." Corbin felt a warmth spread through him, his own gratitude reflected in her words. "You've changed my life too, Lenara, and I'm not going anywhere." Their quiet moment was interrupted by Kara, who approached with a grim expression. "We've got trouble," she said. "Some of Grask's lieutenants survived. They're regrouping outside the district, and they're angry." Corbin's jaw tightened. "How many?" "Too many for us to handle alone," Kara replied. "If they attack, we won't hold them off." Lenara stood, her towering frame casting a shadow over them. "Then we end this. No more running, no more hiding." Corbin nodded, his resolve hardening. "We'll fight, but this time, we'll fight smart." The next morning, the clinic became a fortress. The community worked together, fortifying the walls and setting traps along the streets leading to the clinic. Corbin organized the defenses, while Lenara trained the defenders, her presence inspiring courage in even the most hesitant. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," Lenara told them. "We're fighting for a future where no one else has to suffer like we have." The defenders cheered, their determination fueled by her words. As night fell, Grask's lieutenants launched their attack. The sound of engines and heavy boots echoed through the streets, followed by the crackle of blaster fire. The defenders held their ground, using their knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver the attackers. Lenara stood at the forefront, her massive form a shield for those behind her. She disarmed mercenaries with ease, her strength turning the tide of the battle. Corbin moved among the defenders, treating injuries and coordinating their efforts. The attackers, despite their numbers, began to falter under the coordinated resistance. Yet their leaders pressed on, driven by desperation and vengeance. In the heat of the battle, the attackers unleashed a devastating weapon, a plasma cannon aimed directly at the clinic. The defenders scattered as the cannon fired, its blast tearing through the courtyard. Lenara, seeing the danger, charged toward the weapon. Her massive frame absorbed the impact of smaller blasts as she barreled into the mercenaries operating the cannon, dismantling it with her bare hands. Corbin watched in awe as Lenara turned the tide once again. "You're incredible," he muttered, shaking his head as he refocused on the battle. By dawn, the attackers were defeated, their leaders captured or fleeing into the wilderness. The clinic, though battered, still stood, a symbol of resilience and unity. The community gathered in the courtyard, their cheers echoing through the streets. Kara approached Corbin and Lenara, her face lit with relief. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "We actually did it." Corbin smiled, his exhaustion tempered by pride. "This isn't just a victory for us. It's a message to everyone who thinks they can oppress and exploit. We won't stand for it." Lenara placed a massive hand on Corbin's shoulder, her golden eyes shining with emotion. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Corbin looked up at her, his own gratitude reflected in his gaze. "You don't have to thank me. We did this together. As the community began the work of rebuilding once again, Corbin and Lenara stood together, watching the sunrise. The battle had been won, but they knew the journey ahead would be long. "Did you think it'll ever end?" Lenara asked, her voice quiet. "Maybe not," Corbin replied. "But as long as we stand together, we can face whatever comes next." Lenara smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. "Then we keep fighting, for them. For us." As the sun rose higher, casting light over the clinic and its people, Corbin and Lenara walked back into the heart of the community, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together.